Okay, so welcome again. Thanks for coming. We just did our intro, so I'm not going to go over this again. And we covered admin details. I'm Sonali. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of Petminded. My prior background is I'm a biomedical engineer and a public health researcher. I'm most importantly dog mom to Ella, and Ella is the inspiration behind Petminded. We adopted her about 2.5 years ago, and she comes from a pretty bad situation. So it took essentially a lot of curiosity and a lot of research to figure out how we could best support her and make sure that she had a good life. What is Petminded? For those of you who haven't come to one of our events before, we host events and programs and meetups that can help you understand your dog by making dog science more accessible. The goal really is that everyone should have access to science-based insights so they can have better lives with their pets. And we also really want to support scientists. So there are a lot of great people out there who are doing amazing research, and they are actually looking for study participants. This is, a type of science called citizen science, and we want to be able to bring them to you, but also to encourage you to participate. And you can often participate in these types of research studies sitting at home, which is amazing. I will spend some time at the end after the session is over talking about our program. So if you guys are curious, you can stick around for that. And we do have a few things kicking off, one program starting next week and a few other meetups coming up. So we can definitely talk about that after. This is an online gathering, and I love to see, the dog science community, as I call it, growing. But after we've done 75 events in the past year, we've had to come up with some community guidelines. So I think the most important one is be the person your dog thinks you are. Be kind, be curious, be thoughtful, ask questions. There's no wrong questions, but be open-minded and be willing to consider new viewpoints. Also, no self-promotion, because this is a learning community and I'm very protective of that. So, even if you're selling an amazing service, I'm happy to collaborate offline, but I'd love to keep focused on the topic of the day. And then the most important one is no hate speech. I think this one is very self-explanatory. Never been a problem with the dog community, but given recent events, I am obligated to say it. Cool. So we have two experts today from Wisdom Panel. Dr. Jonas Donner. He is a discovery scientist at Wisdom Panel, and Jonas is actually in Finland, so he agreed to do a recorded interview with us today. So I will be playing that very shortly. But we also have with us his colleague, Dr. Rebecca Ferran. She's the head of R&D at Wisdom Panel, and I'll do a proper introduction to her after we are done watching the interview. But I just wanted to give you guys a sense that we're really lucky to have, two really awesome speakers today, and to be able to talk to you about dog genetics. Our beneficiary for today is Social T's Animal Rescue. So for every live attendee that's coming today, we are donating $1. We also just want to raise awareness about this rescue in particular. They're New York City based. They're bringing in dogs from all over the country for adoption and do tremendous work. So do also just go check them out. They're definitely could use volunteers and donors and so forth. So I am going to play our interview with Dr. Donner. This is about 15 minutes. And following this, we will have the opportunity to talk to Dr. Ferran. She's going to answer some additional questions. As always, if you guys have anything come up, please feel free to drop it in the chat and I will do my best to answer.
Sonali, we can't hear him.
So it sounds like the audio is a bit low. I'm going to try to adjust that really, really quick. So give me one moment.
Sonali, I think you have to share computer audio. There
Um,
should be an
yeah, we are on my MacBook Pro speakers. Do you think there is a different setting? Sorry, everyone. Tech issues
Yeah,
seem to be
you
following
see
us.
you see at the bottom of the share screen, it says share sound on the bottom left.
Got it. Thank you so much, Tatiana. You're a lifesaver. Give me 1 second. And I will play from the beginning. Okay, so let's try this again.
Hello, my name is Jonas Darner. I'm PhD geneticist, and I live in Helsinki, Finland. I've studied genetics. It was such an interesting area. There was so many things happening right around the millennium when I had to choose what I wanted to do with my life, and so I got into studying human anxiety disorders at first, and that's where I did what I did my PhD thesis on. And then when I was done with that, I realized that I wanted to do a follow up, and I got really interested in dogs as well as a model for behavior and for genetics, and thought that maybe I just might be able to solve some of the issues that were not so easy to solve on the human side in with dogs. And then of course my wife breeds Shetland sheepdog, and I got very involved in that as well. So that's how I got interested in dogs overall. And I've been involved in genetic testing of dogs and developing genetic tests for dogs for around 8 years now, and still working on that.
So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about genetic testing for dogs specifically, and when someone signs up to get their dog's genetic test, what type of information can they hope to receive? Um, and what does that mean, sort of not just for not just for purebred dogs, but also for dogs that have are mutts and have different breed compositions?
There are quite a lot of things that you can learn nowadays by genetic testing your dog. So you can learn about inherited disease predispositions. So if there are any risks you be aware of, especially early on. If you can do a genetic test at any age, but if you do it on a puppy, you can learn about some things that you can actually prevent from happening later on, or you if with the appropriate treatment or any specific medical needs or fault needs for follow up that you should be aware of. So I think that's very beneficial for any pet parent to know about their puppy and its special needs and diet in some cases. Um, so the disease predispositions, that's definitely one thing. And then also, of course, you can learn a lot about your dog's appearance and why it has long coat and why it has a coat that is a specific color. Why does it have a flat face, and or why not? You can learn some things about tail length and size. So of course some of those things are observable, but you can learn about the genetic background of those traits, and sometimes it's not that evident. And uh, we have so many breeders that are interested and pet parents that are interested in what coat color their dog's offspring might be if they decide to breed it. So that's definitely of interest. Um, Then you can learn, of course, about ancestry. If you have a mixed breed dog, you can learn about what breeds might have contributed, what the history of your dog is, and that does tell. If you get a purebred dog, you have an idea what you're getting, but with a mixed breed dog, you might not know for sure. So learning about the breed ancestry does tell you something. So that's definitely of interest too. And with DNA, there are, you know, that it can work as a DNA fingerprint. You can identify your dog should that ever be needed based on DNA, or find its relatives online, just like you can do with those human DNA tests services. You can find your long lost relatives or close relatives, and that does work for dogs as well. So you might learn where it's actually coming from, get in touch with some people.
I know you recently did a study with Airedale Terriers, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's a really great example about, you know, looking beyond the breed of a dog. When we study their genetics, like what else can be revealed by studying them. So if you could talk a bit about that, that'd be great.
Sure. So it's a very typical scenario where um, breeders or one or a few contact geneticists and say that they have a litter with multiple puppies dying from what appears to be the same disease, um, a lung disease, for instance, in this case. And of course, it's the nightmare of a breeder, and everyone wants to breed healthy dogs and wants to understand why that happened and what can be done about it. And that's when geneticists are contacted and start acquiring DNA samples from the dam and the sire, and start studying and the puppies, and start studying and looking for what mutation there might be in the genome, and that might be the cause of this disease. So we have our genetic technologies for screening the genome and trying to find out which gene and which mutation in that gene is responsible. And that's a quite typical process to first screen the whole genome, and then start looking in more detail at regions that come up in the genome that are interesting and may have some candidate genes. So say for a lung disease, you'd be interested in any genes that you have a hypothesis that they may be involved in respiration in some way, or normal lung functioning. And then if you're lucky, you find a mutation in that gene, and then you have something that you um, can if you validate functionally, meaning that you have to provide some evidence that that mutation is really causal and not just a harmless change in the genome.
Mhm.
Um, and when you're confident that you found the right mutation for dogs, what you can do is start offering a genetic test to breeders, so that breeders can avoid breeding more puppies with that particular disease. And then for humans, if you have a similar disease described in humans, you can screen their DNA and look at that particular candidate gene that you found in dogs and see if there are some other. You're not expecting it to be the exact same mutation, but if there's some evidence there of a mutation in that gene. And depending on what gene is involved, you can get clues about what could be the most appropriate treatment as well in humans. So it's definitely benefiting the health of both dogs and humans alike. Dogs are, as they're many are pretty large animals, so we tend to think that their metabolism and physiology is more similar to humans as well. Than, for instance, if you look at a mouse or model or something like that. And of course, dogs are we mostly our pets, and they live with us in our homes and share our environment, are a really good model in that way as well. They even share some of our food and even our beds. So you have for some diseases, and the environment is more similar as well to
Right.
what humans would experience.
I'm also curious, both from a scientific perspective and also as a pet parent perspective, what are the questions in this area that you are most interested in, um, answering next, or things that maybe keep you up at night, or yeah, any version thereof. Like what's next in terms of what answers can we get from these types of tests?
I think one thing that keeps me up is at night, of course, is that we're quite overwhelmed with the information. It's so easy to get a lot of genetic data from any animal. So that's soon becoming feasibility, so that we can a genetic test will become routine for most any dog. So then we have other challenges to tackle, and so how do we interpret all of that data going forward, even how do we store all of that data that we couldn't even imagine that 20 years ago, that there was a vision that DNA testing would become a routine, but we are, I think, working towards that era when it will be a routine to have a DNA test done when you visit a vet clinic, or even for you as a human. So I think we have some um, challenges to solve there, and I want to learn how to interpret all of that genetic data in the best possible and responsible way, because we know that we're going to have it now, and it won't be too many years until that is a reality. So definitely that's one thing that keeps me up at night. And of course I have an interest in solving the genetic background of many diseases, and that we haven't been able to tackle so far.
Yeah. As a follow-up to that, I mean, you already talked a little bit about the interpretation of these results, and that perhaps sometimes they can be misinterpreted, or perhaps people don't. We might take them at face value, and it could lead to some impulsive decisions. I'm curious if there are people in this audience that have had tests or are planning to get them. Is there like any advice or any resource you would point them to think more carefully about the data that they're seeing when they get their test results back?
What might not be evident at first is that there's a lot of science behind producing those results. So I think with power to produce a lot of genetic data also comes responsibility, of course, to, I mean, do it in a sound way. So that's also something I'm a firm believer in, and making sure that people understand the test results that they have there, and being open to feedback also from any pet parent or breeder or veterinarian who's tested their dogs. So DNA tests are available for anyone. And no, and one piece of advice would be, don't be shy to say if there's something you don't understand and want more information about. Then of course whoever you tested with needs to know that, and hear you, and make sure that you understand the result, what the results mean, but also what they do not mean. So it's also, if you tested 200 diseases, it means that you have results for those 200 diseases, but it doesn't really tell you about things that were not tested. So I've heard someone say that their dog is completely healthy and clear of everything because it had this DNA test done. But of course there are things that even the best DNA tests these days haven't solved yet. So I think it's a developing process all the time. We're never really done as a geneticist or genetic tester. We're learning more all the time, and that's great too.
Right. Yeah. And thank you for that, because one of the goals of Dog Science Week is really, we want people to think more critically about the information that they receive out there in the world, and be able to make sense of it. So what you're describing, you're describing a scientific method to be curious, but also to sort of calmly assess what you're seeing out there. So I appreciate that. Is there anything that you want to share with the audience that you feel that, as not just as a geneticist, but as a scientist, that you would want pet parents to be thinking about, either in the care of their dog, in the selection of their dogs, or just anything that you want to leave them with?
Yeah, definitely stay open-minded about genetics and genetic testing. I know, especially for some older people, if this information hasn't been around for that long and it's developed so quickly in context. So stay curious, stay open-minded and open to learn more about your dog, and keep telling us about your dog's behavior and its appearance. We love to hear about it, and in that way, your each and every DNA test contributes to research. So each and every dog's information is valuable for us geneticists.
Great. Jonas, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure the audience will have some questions, so we'll take them in the Q&A portion of today's session. But thank you again for taking the time. As I mentioned, guys, Jonas is in Finland, so there is a significant time difference. So I really appreciate you being willing to do this. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for listening into that. I know a few additional people came in, so just to restate what's going on, we just watched an interview with Dr. Jonas Donner from Wisdom Health, and you will receive it as part of the recording. But up next, we have another expert, Dr. Becca Foran. She is the head of R&D at Wisdom Panel. And she has a ton of experience at the intersection of clinical genomics, product development, and is very passionate about translating genetic discoveries into actionable insights. So I'm really, really glad that we have her here. I noticed that a few questions did already come in, but if you have questions about what you heard from Jonas, or you have additional questions about genetic testing, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And I'm going to spotlight Rebecca as well. Rebecca, thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Sonali, thank you so much for inviting me and putting this week together. And thanks to everyone for joining tonight and spending your evening with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I think I am going to start pulling up questions for you. But actually, one question that came to my mind, Becca, was, which I didn't ask Jonas, but what is the overlap between the human genetic sequence and the dog genetic sequence?
I love this question. And I've been talking about it since I did my PhD way too long ago, because it really highlights the exquisite diversity that comes out of just little tiny changes in the genome, and also highlights the similarity between us. So humans and dogs share about 86% of their DNA. And for some people, they say, that's crazy. We're so different. How could it be the case? And some people say exactly the opposite, just depending on their perspective. So I think that what it highlights is there's so much genetic similarity between humans and dogs, meaning that a lot of the same genetic conditions that dogs experience, humans can experience. So we can learn a lot from dogs and then hypothetically apply it to therapies in humans. We're kind of just on the scratching the surface of the similarities, but to date, 56% of the genetic diseases that have been discovered in dogs have human correlates.
That is so interesting. And I feel like dog owners perhaps intuitively understand this, or dog people do, but perhaps people who don't have dogs maybe would be the skeptics that you mentioned. So we do have a question from Lori. She wants to understand if strokes are genetic, and if you have information on that, or if you can talk about that.
I'll answer that question in a probably frustrating way that geneticists and scientists always do, which is sometimes. So genes are just one part of the equation, and there are absolutely genetic underpinnings for a lot of complex disorders like stroke. And then there are also attributes from the environment, from the way that the dog was raised, how the dog's the familial history, and all of those together will increase or decrease the risk of stroke. That said, there are a number of active research projects that are going on across the country, and in fact across the world, on the genetic architecture of stroke, in particular breeds of dog that are more predisposed to it. And I'm optimistic that within the next 5 or 10 years, we'll have a much better understanding of why strokes happen in certain dogs.
Great, thank you. We have another question. Catherine wants to know, how much do scientists feel that personality or behavior are tied to breed or genetics? Ooh.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one that a lot of canine geneticists are fascinated by. It's actually one of the reasons why canine genetics is such an active field, because we can learn so much about the canonical behaviors particular to specific breeds of dog. So actually, just in the past couple of years, there was a study from James Serpell at the University of Pennsylvania that provided the first foundational study on genetics associated with behaviors in specific breeds. And through that study, he was able to associate about 15% of different behaviors with genetic factors. I think it was 140 different genetic mutations. That doesn't sound like a lot, but for scientists across the field, it was really exciting, and it does lay the groundwork for future studies in the area. So I'd say, just like my previous answer, it's always going to be a mix of the genetics and the environment, but we are starting to learn that there's specific genetic regions that are controlling certain types of behaviors in dogs.
Thanks. Yeah, we actually have a cognition researcher who is going to be giving a talk, because she just published a paper in March about how dog cognition is related to breeds. And she, she was able to find this public, well, it's not a public database, but it's a citizen science project. And she had about 30,000 data points and some really interesting findings. So it's really cool to see all the research that's come out in the last few years, particularly.
Absolutely, yeah.
If other folks have questions, Catherine says, thank you. Carolyn wants to know, what are the most common conditions shared between humans and canines? And have we learned much from dogs that is positively affecting treatments for humans as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there is quite a bit of overlap, specifically in certain types of cancers. There are a lot of researchers that are looking into the similarities between canine cancers and human cancers, and there are both, again, genetic factors and environmental factors that contribute to those. And then there are also a number of first world disorders that dogs share with us, because they've come with us to the first world. So things like obesity and diabetes and heart disease, we're also seeing in dogs, but at increased progression. Their lives are shorter, so that we're seeing them earlier. And we're just starting again to scratch the surface of the similarities and differences between humans and dogs. I can say that there have been some really important discoveries made in canine cancer that have been applied to human cancer treatments. There have also been some foundational studies in rare canine diseases that have helped scientists understand some of the biological pathways that attribute to human diseases. Scientists aren't yet at the point where they've developed medications or therapeutics for those specific pathways, but they're on their way thanks to the discoveries made in dogs.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is a really exciting time to be doing research.
Yeah. I think, guys, we can probably take one, maybe two more questions max, but if while we wait for that, I can throw in my other question. So it sounds like you guys at Wisdom have a ton of data because so many people are interested in understanding their dog's ancestry and want to know their genetics. What kinds of questions are you looking at answering? I know the Airedale study was really interesting. It was published earlier this year. Are there any other projects ongoing?
We have the privilege actually of having access to over 2 million dog DNA sequences, which is pretty staggering in the scientific field. We also have clinical data from medical records associated with hundreds of thousands of dogs. So we're in the process of looking at the medical records plus the genetics to see whether we can use the genetics to predict more complex disorders like diabetes, cancer, heart disease. We're in the early phases of those studies. One of the other areas we're really excited about that we're hoping to launch in the next year are evaluations of behaviors that are common in certain types of dog breeds. And the way that we're hoping to get about the answers is to ask pet parents about these particular behaviors. Because we have such a significant biorepository already, and we have so many people interested in taking tests with us, we can reach back out to them and get answers from them about how their dog acts in particular types of scenarios.
Yeah, we have two more questions, and one got an upvote from someone else. So I'm going to take that one for our closing question. Are there any ways to get hints on a dog's genetic background without doing a test? Margaret is a foster and she doesn't have a forever pet, so she can't do the testing as much as she'd love to for each pup. Do their behaviors or paw size or anything else give any of this info away?
So there are certain things that you can do to, I think, figure out the breed background of the dog. Is that the question? Yeah. I think, again, it depends. So there is this statistic that's passed around that on average, people are only right about their dog's breed background 25% of the time using visual identification alone. And that is actually the case with veterinarians as well. So people that see dogs day in and day out. It's really just the way that traits are interspersed throughout lots of different dog breeds. So unfortunately, I think it's tough, but I think that you could probably make some pretty good guesses depending on what types of breeds are in the dog's background.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Becca. This is great. I think people are really glad that we were able to have you here as well today. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I really hope this conversation and the conversation with Jonah sparked some curiosity about folks and their dogs and their ancestry. And I just really appreciate everyone for being here and listening in. So we are almost at 5:15 or 8:15 on the East Coast. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And Leslie, thank you for dropping the study into the chat. I will be sharing information about Wisdom Panel and then the study that was referenced in the follow-up. So you guys will be able to take a look at that. But also before we close, if folks want to stick around, I know there were a lot of questions about some of the programs that Petminded is offering this week and then later. So if you guys want to stick around, I'd be happy to share information on that as well. But otherwise, thank you so much again, Becca. Thank you to the team at Wisdom for participating and being part of this. I see some hearts in the chat and I see a lot of thank yous. So thank you again for coming.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so for the folks who are sticking around, I'm going to just quickly pull up my slides that answer a few of the questions that came up. If you guys want to stick around and just give me 1 second, I will do that. But also please feel free to leave if you have other things to do tonight. No pressure. I see some folks are still joining or maybe they're coming back in. So while I'm looking for my file, I'll tell you what's on deck for the rest of the week. As I mentioned earlier, we are making recordings of everything that is happening this week. So you will receive that at the end of the week. We also are, we have on deck tomorrow, Oscar Chavez from Just Food for Dogs. On Thursday, we have Dr. Holly Gans from Animal Biome. She's talking about gut health. And on Friday, we have our very own resident dog scientist, Lasuna Yu, and she will be talking about dog cognition and behavior. And she's also, she's really great at creating games because she has a background working at a dog lab, at a dog cognition lab. So she has created an interactive game that we will play together with our dogs, and it will reveal something about your dog's cognition. So stay tuned for that. And now, as promised, I have my presentation back up. So hopefully everyone can see it. So I got some questions about this program that's kicking off on Monday. So I just quickly want to cover what you can expect. So we do have, as I mentioned earlier, Petminded is focused on dog science. And we are kicking off a 6-week program next Monday, though the live games begin on Wednesday. It's essentially intended to help you learn the basic concepts in dog cognition, really better understand how your dog is thinking and perceive the world. And hopefully that helps to either address behavioral conditions or prevent, maybe not prevent, prevent is probably not the right word. It's not the scientific word. I would say keep them sharp and think of it as cognitive enrichment, essentially. And then we do have, as I mentioned, over the last 2 days, we have a few scientists coming in who are currently doing research in the dog cognition space. They will be coming and talking about their latest studies. And one of them is going to talk about how our dogs problem solve. So if you've ever wondered how your dog knows to, be up to mischief when you're not in the room, we're answering questions like that. But also we are looking at the genetic differences in cognition and so forth. We do have live games, like I mentioned, that Lasuna creates. Lasuna is she has a degree in animal behavior and cognition. So she will be designing games that illustrate these concepts, and we will play them together on Wednesdays. It's usually the most fun thing that we do. So if you join the program, please try to attend those. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to email. I answered, I think, most of your emails today, but if I didn't get to it, I apologize. I will get to them. But you're also welcome to message us on Instagram or Facebook if that's helpful. Oh, and as promised in the email, we do have a code as our thanks for you guys attending today. I will also put that in the follow-up email, but I'll drop it if I can figure out how to use my my very own laptop. I will also drop it in the chat. So if anyone who's still here has a question, please let me know. And thank you for sticking around an extra few minutes to go over this with me. Any questions?